I'm a 28-year-old guy, and if you'd asked me a few years ago where I thought I'd be at this point in my life, I would have painted a picture of stability, success, and maybe even a bit of admiration from my parents. After all, they were the ones who pushed me through school, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be, right? But here's the thing, none of that ever came. Not from them. My parents, well, let's just say they didn't exactly make me feel like I was on the right path. In fact, I spent most of my 20s feeling like I was chasing their approval for no reason other than to get an ounce of respect. I worked my butt off, poured hours into everything I did, projects, jobs, even side hustles. Yet, for every win, they barely acknowledged it. Every little success was brushed off with, "It's not enough," or worse, "We thought you'd do better." So, when they called me up last month, my mom, sobbing, my dad practically begging on the other end of the line, that same old feeling came rushing back. I knew exactly what was coming. Here's how it went down. It was a Friday evening, one of those rare nights where I actually had a moment to breathe. I was sitting at home, catching up on some reading, when my phone rang. The caller ID said Mom. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" I answered casually, already preparing myself for the usual small talk. But instead, she was different. There was this crack in her voice, something I hadn't heard before. "Sweetheart, I don't know how to say this, but we need your help." Her voice wavered. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I asked, my mind racing. "Well, your dad and we've fallen behind on some bills. It's been tough lately. I'm sure you've heard about the economy." She went on, talking about the struggles, the mounting debts, how they tried everything to get back on track, but it just wasn't enough. I sat there in silence, trying to piece it together. The same parents who had made me feel like my accomplishments were nothing were now asking me for money. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people who had always seemed to have it all together, who had put so much pressure on me to do better, were now asking for a handout. I really don't know what to say," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How much are we talking here?" There was a brief pause, and then my dad's voice cut through. "We just need a loan, son. It's not permanent, we promise. Just to get us through. Maybe a couple thousand?" "A couple thousand. Just a couple thousand to get them by." My mind was spinning. Of course, they needed money. But the question that kept coming back to me, over and over, was this: why now? This wasn't the first time they'd faced financial struggles. They had always found a way to get back on their feet, or at least pretended they did. But this time felt different. This time, the desperation was real. The anger, the resentment, the years of feeling like I was never good enough, like my efforts didn't matter, it all came rushing back. They wanted my money. They wanted my help. But here's the thing, the last time I checked, I was still their kid. They were supposed to be the ones supporting me, not the other way around. They were the ones who always set the bar too high, who never recognized my efforts, who made me feel like I was never enough. So, when they came to me with their sob story, asking for a lifeline, well, let's just say I didn't exactly jump at the chance to bail them out. Something inside me snapped. But the thing is, I couldn't just say no. I wasn't the kind of guy who could watch his parents suffer, no matter how bitter I felt about everything. But I knew I had to give them a reality check. They needed to understand just how much their actions had shaped me, how their lack of appreciation for my struggles had scarred me. And if they were going to ask for help, they needed to know exactly what that meant. I spent the rest of that evening in a daze. My mind was on autopilot, replaying the conversation over and over again. I couldn't shake the image of my parents, my dad, usually so proud and sure of himself, sounding so small, so defeated. And my mom, always the strong one, now sounding completely fragile. But as much as I could feel the weight of their situation, I also couldn't ignore the bitterness that was bubbling up inside me. I thought about everything that led up to this moment. The years of being told I wasn't doing enough. The constant pressure to be better, to achieve more, to get that elusive praise I had never gotten from them. The late nights I spent grinding away at projects and side hustles that always seemed to fall short in their eyes. They never saw the sacrifices I made. They never saw the exhaustion that left me with barely enough energy to even talk to them. And now, here they were, calling me for help. The same parents who had never supported my ambitions, who never acknowledged my wins, suddenly needed me. It didn't sit right. The next day, I got a text from my mom. "Please, we need your help. Just this one time. Things are really tough, and we don't know who else to turn to. We've tried everything." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. What was I supposed to say? I felt like I was trapped between two worlds, one where my heart ached for them, and one where my pride screamed at me to say no. To make them see how badly they'd messed up. So I thought about it. I really did. I paced around the apartment, trying to find some clarity. But there was no clarity to be found. I could ignore them, let them deal with their own mess. That would have been the easy way out, but I wasn't sure I could live with myself if I did that. Even if they had never recognized my struggles, I wasn't heartless. But I couldn't just let it slide either. I couldn't act like I hadn't been hurt by all those years of feeling invisible in their eyes. I'd spent so much of my life trying to meet their expectations, and they'd never bothered to show me any appreciation. So I did what felt like the only thing left to do. I agreed to meet them. I told them I'd come over the next weekend. The plan was simple. I'd show up, have a frank conversation with them, and maybe give them the money they asked for. But it wasn't going to be that easy. No, I had some things I needed to say. Some things that had been building up for years. When I walked into their house on Saturday afternoon, I could feel the tension in the air. My mom was in the kitchen, trying to act like everything was normal, but the strain in her smile was hard to ignore. My dad was sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to the TV but not really watching it. He glanced up when I walked in, but there was no enthusiasm, no warmth. Just a tired acknowledgement that I was there. I sat down across from them. There was an awkward silence that stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, my mom spoke first. "We're so grateful you came. We really need this." I nodded but didn't respond right away. "Listen, I know things haven't always been great between us," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I've been carrying a lot of weight on my shoulders for a long time. And I'm not just talking about money or bills. I'm talking about all the times you guys made me feel like I wasn't good enough. All the times I worked my ass off and you barely acknowledged it." My mom's face went pale. My dad shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I didn't stop. "You guys put so much pressure on me, told me I had to be better, do more, achieve more. But none of that ever seemed to be enough for you. And now, when things get tough for you, you're the ones asking for help. It's a lot to swallow." The room was silent again. My mom opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but no words came out. My dad was still staring at the TV, but his hand was clenched into a fist. "Do you understand?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper now. "Do you get how much this hurts? How much this feels like a slap in the face?" They didn't say anything for a long time. And honestly, I didn't expect them to. How could they? How could they understand the years of frustration I had built up inside me? The feeling that I was never good enough for them, no matter how hard I tried. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my dad spoke. I didn't know you felt that way, son. I guess we were wrong. We pushed you because we thought it was what you needed. We didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I let out a long breath. Yeah, well, now you know. And then, in that moment, I had a choice. I could have just handed over the money, walked out, and let them figure things out on their own. But I knew this wasn't just about the money. This was about making them understand. Making them see how their actions, how their lack of support, had shaped who I was. And how it had left me with a pretty heavy load to carry. So I decided to give them a reality check. The silence in the room was suffocating, almost like it had taken on a life of its own. My dad shifted in his seat, not quite meeting my eyes. I could tell he wanted to speak, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. My mom, on the other hand, was doing her best to hold it together, but her fingers were fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, and I could see that familiar look of guilt in her eyes. It was like she was already bracing for whatever was coming next, as if she knew things weren't going to go the way they hoped. I wasn't going to let it go that easily. Not after all the years of feeling ignored, like my achievements didn't matter, like I was just another project for them to push harder, but never once showed any real appreciation. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about respect. It was about making them face the reality of how they treated me. They needed to hear it. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, I said, my voice steady but carrying an edge I hadn't meant to add. You guys wanted me to be perfect. You pushed me like I was supposed to be some kind of machine, and when I didn't live up to that, when I didn't hit every single mark you set for me, you were disappointed. I let the words hang in the air. My mom's eyes started to tear up, but she didn't wipe them away. She just stared at me, like she was processing something she hadn't fully understood before. We didn't mean to push you too hard, my dad finally spoke up, his voice tight, like he was forcing the words out. We just wanted you to do well. We wanted you to have a better life than we did. I almost laughed. I really did. Yeah, well, maybe that's the problem, I said, my tone sharper than I expected. You wanted me to have a better life, but you never stopped to ask me what I actually wanted. You never once asked me what made me happy, what made me feel like I was achieving something. You just put all this pressure on me to be something I wasn't. I watched them both, trying to read their faces, wondering if they really understood the depth of it all. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but every time she opened her mouth, she closed it again. My dad, on the other hand, looked like he was lost in thought, like he was mentally rewinding the years, replaying all the moments when maybe, just maybe, he should have done things differently. But here's the thing, I couldn't just let them off the hook. They had to realize the damage they'd done. And I wasn't going to let them walk out of this conversation with just a quick apology and a promise to change. That wouldn't be enough. They needed to hear the truth. You know, I continued, feeling the heat rise in my chest again, I've been busting my ass for years. I've taken jobs I hated, worked late nights, sacrificed my free time, all to make sure I had something to show for myself. And every time I did, it was never enough for you. You'd just find something else to criticize, something else to point out that I wasn't doing right. And I'll be honest, it felt like nothing I did mattered. The room was heavy now, thick with the weight of the words I was throwing out. They couldn't escape it. They couldn't pretend like this wasn't an issue anymore. Do you know what it feels like, I asked, my voice getting quieter but somehow more intense, to work yourself to the bone, only to hear your parents say, it's still not good enough? Do you know how it feels to never hear a single I'm proud of you, even when you put in all this effort? There was a brief moment where I thought I saw my dad's face twitch, like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. My mom was looking at me like she was trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking, I didn't realize we made you feel that way. I almost rolled my eyes. The apology was too little, too late. Maybe they were finally seeing it, but part of me wondered if they even fully understood what I was talking about. Did they really get it? Could they even grasp how long I'd carried that burden of trying to meet expectations that were impossible to reach? I wasn't so sure. "You didn't just make me feel that way," I shot back, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You made me feel like I was never enough. Like everything I did was just a stepping stone for you to push me further, until I hit the next milestone, and the next, and the next. You didn't see me, Mom. You didn't see me, Dad. You saw a project." They were both silent now, and it felt like the air in the room had gone still. I wasn't expecting them to jump up and apologize in the way I wanted, but I needed to know that they understood. I needed them to see that this wasn't just about money, it was about years of being overlooked and undervalued. "So yeah," I finally said, after a long pause, my voice softer now but carrying the weight of everything I had just said, "I'm not just going to hand you the money without making sure you know what this really means. You spent years making me feel like I had to prove myself to you, like nothing was ever good enough, and now you expect me to fix things just like that?" They didn't have an answer. They couldn't. Because, in that moment, it wasn't about fixing things. It was about confronting the reality of what they had done. What they had put me through. And I wasn't going to let that go. I wasn't sure how this conversation was going to end, but I knew one thing for sure, things were never going to be the same again. And maybe that was the point. The silence in the room was suffocating now. My words had hit harder than I thought they would. My dad, who had always been so proud, so sure of himself, sat there frozen. I could see him trying to process what I'd just said, but it was like I'd just shattered this image he'd held of himself as the perfect father, the one who had done everything right. And my mom, well, her face was a mess. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't dare wipe them away. She just sat there, staring at the floor, probably too ashamed to even look at me. I had said it all, the truth, the bitterness, the years of pent-up frustration, and now the ball was in their court. But I wasn't expecting some grand apology. Hell, I didn't even know what I was expecting anymore. Was I supposed to feel better after this? Did I even want to fix things? I wasn't sure. What I did know, though, was that the way they saw me had to change. I needed them to understand. "So," I said, my voice quieter now but still laced with tension, "what's it gonna be? You came here, asking for help. And now you want me to just give you a couple thousand without any real understanding of how much this all stings?" I let that sink in, watching them squirm. My dad finally opened his mouth, his voice unsteady. I didn't realize. I didn't know it was that bad for you. I thought we were pushing you to do better, to make something of yourself, but if it hurt you, then I'm sorry. I could feel a flicker of something deep inside me, maybe it was guilt, maybe just raw emotion, but I didn't let it show. "Yeah, well, you can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay," I snapped, my frustration seeping through again. "It doesn't work like that. It's not just about me being mad at you for pushing me, it's about the fact that you never saw me. You never understood how hard I worked just to get a little bit of respect from you." My mom sniffed, her hand trembling as she wiped her cheek. "We never meant to make you feel like that. You're right, we should have noticed sooner, we just thought you'd be okay. We thought you were handling it all." That was the thing. They always thought I was handling it. They saw me get by. Hell, I was always putting on a brave face because I didn't want to disappoint them, but they never truly saw the weight I was carrying. They didn't see the exhaustion in my eyes after long hours at work, or the moments when I had to sacrifice everything I wanted just to meet their standards. "Handling it? You have no idea," I muttered. "You had no clue what was going on behind the scenes, did you? You had no idea how many times I wanted to just quit everything and walk away from it all. But I didn't. I kept going. And you didn't even notice." My dad's eyes dropped to the floor, and for the first time, I saw something in him that wasn't just pride. I don't know if it was regret or guilt, but it was something real. "We were wrong, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't see it. I didn't realize. We pushed you too hard. I pushed you too hard." There it was. He finally said it. But even with the apology hanging in the air, I wasn't sure how much it changed things. Because, truth be told, those words didn't feel like enough. They were too late. I leaned back in my chair and ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm the storm of emotions crashing in my chest. "I get it. I get that you thought you were doing what was best for me. But you didn't understand the toll it took. And now, you expect me to just let all of that go because you need a little help? You didn't even consider how hard this is for me, too. How hard it is to even look at you right now without feeling like I'm just your backup plan when things go wrong." The tension in the room grew thick again. My mom reached for my dad's hand, squeezing it as though she was silently pleading with me to understand. But I wasn't ready to give in yet. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. I stood up from the table, pacing the small room. I had to get this out. "I don't think you guys realize how much you've taken from me over the years. You took my confidence, you took my drive, and you took away any belief that I could ever do something on my own terms." I stopped pacing and looked at them both, eyes blazing. "You wanted me to be this version of me that you created in your minds, and when I didn't fit that mold, you didn't see me. You just saw failure." "Son," my dad began, but I cut him off, not letting him finish. "No," I said firmly, my voice hardening, "you need to hear me out. I'm not doing this because I'm mad. I'm doing this because you've taught me something over the years. You've taught me that your approval isn't something I can earn, because it's always going to be out of my reach. You've taught me that the only person I can count on to respect me is myself." It was quiet again, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was me reclaiming my own sense of self-worth. And as much as I had wanted to walk away from this conversation feeling vindicated, I wasn't sure that was going to happen. I wasn't sure there was any way to fix what had been broken for so long. "You want help?" I asked, turning to face them. "Maybe you should figure out how to respect me first. Maybe you should figure out how to appreciate the person I've become, not just the version of me you wanted." I could see them both struggling, both wanting to say something, but the words were stuck. And I was okay with that. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just trying to make them proud. I wasn't just trying to earn their love or their respect. I had found it in myself, and that was something they couldn't take away. The silence that followed my words was deafening. It was almost like everything had just stopped. The weight of what I'd said hung in the air, thick and undeniable. My parents sat there, wide-eyed and silent, processing what had just happened. I didn't expect some instant change or epiphany. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I expected. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to leave this conversation with any false illusions. This was the moment where everything changed, whether they realized it or not. I stared at them for what felt like an eternity, trying to gauge if they truly understood what I was saying. Part of me wanted them to apologize, to really see me for the first time in my life and acknowledge everything I'd been through. But part of me also knew that this wasn't about me getting an apology. This was about me taking back control of my life, my choices, my dignity. My dad finally spoke, his voice quiet but sincere. "You're right. We didn't get it. We didn't see it. And for that, I'm sorry." He paused, searching for the right words. "I pushed you, thinking I was helping, but I was wrong. I see that now. And I can't take back the years, but I can try to do better." I nodded, though I wasn't sure how to feel. Those words were the first real acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from him about the way he treated me. But was it enough? Could I just move on from everything I'd felt over the years because of one apology? My mom chimed in, her voice trembling. I never realized how much you were carrying. How much I was pushing you. I thought I was just helping you stay focused, but I see now how much it hurt you. She wiped her eyes again, and this time, I could see the pain in her expression, not just for the situation, but for the realization of how her actions had affected me. As much as I wanted to forgive them right then and there, I wasn't ready. It wasn't that I didn't want to, God. I wanted to feel like everything was okay. But this wasn't something that could be fixed with a few words. I had spent too many years feeling like my efforts didn't matter, like my sacrifices were invisible. And though I was proud of the man I'd become, I needed to let them sit with what they had done. I needed them to feel the weight of it. So, I stayed silent, letting them absorb the reality of what I had said. Finally, after a long pause, I spoke again. Look, I don't know what you expect from me right now. I can't just fix everything in one conversation. I'm not your backup plan anymore. You don't get to call me when you need help, and then pretend like everything's fine when you've made me feel like garbage for years. I took a deep breath, the anger bubbling back up. And I'm sorry, but I can't just hand over the money like nothing happened. Not without a real understanding of what I've been through. Not without you understanding what it felt like to always be striving for something that was never enough for you. There was another long silence, but this time, it wasn't awkward. It was just heavy. My parents weren't fighting back, they weren't trying to explain themselves away. They were just listening. And for the first time, I felt like I had been heard. After a while, my dad spoke again, his voice rough. I get it. I really do. I know we messed up. I know we've hurt you. And I don't expect you to just let it go because we're in a tight spot. I don't expect you to just fix everything for us. But I hope that, one day, you'll see we're trying to change. Trying to be better for you, for us. I don't know if I can ever make up for the years I pushed you like I did, but I'm going to try. My mom nodded, her eyes filled with tears now. I don't want to just be your mom anymore. I want to be someone who sees you, who appreciates you, who doesn't take you for granted. I want you to know I'm proud of you, no matter what. That hit me harder than I thought it would. I'd spent so long waiting for that acknowledgement. Waiting for them to say those words, just once. But I wasn't sure if I could just believe it. Not yet. I stood up from my seat, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I'm not sure where we go from here, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. But I do know one thing, I'm not that kid anymore. I'm not the person who's just going to keep doing what you want to make you happy. I've found my own path, and I have to stick with it. But if you really want to be a part of my life moving forward, you've got to understand who I am. And I need you to show me that you actually see me, not just the version of me you've always wanted. There was no big hug, no grand reconciliation. But for the first time, it felt like something shifted in the air between us. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it wasn't a fairy tale ending. But it was real. And that was enough for me. I didn't give them the money that day. And honestly, I'm still not sure if I ever will. But I think they finally understood something important. They needed to recognize me, not just as their son, but as a person with his own life, his own choices, and his own struggles. And maybe, just maybe, this conversation was the first step towards something better. For all of us.